Captain David Hayes stood on the observation deck of his ship, the horizon's light, watching the massive space station grow larger as they approached. The station gleamed with silver and gold, a symbol of the most powerful empire in known space. Hayes had received the invitation 3 weeks ago, and he still could not believe his luck. A personal request from the Emperor himself to attend a diplomatic summit. This could change everything for the human colony on 442b. The message had been formal and brief. The Empire sought to expand its alliances. The Emperor had a proposal that could benefit any species willing to listen. Hayes had dropped everything to make the journey across 3 star systems. The future of humanity in this region of space might depend on what happened in the next few days. As Hayes walked through the massive docking bay, he noticed something strange. The station was crowded with alien delegations, far more than expected for a simple alliance discussion. Representatives from the crystalline, the Venusian collective, and dozens of other species filled the halls. Each species seemed to be waiting for something important. Some looked excited, others seemed confused. An escort droid led Hayes to the main throne room, where the Emperor sat on a platform of polished stone. The Emperor was tall and perfect in every way, with flawless skin that seemed to glow with an inner light. His features were sharp and precise, like someone had carved them from marble. This was the mark of power: perfect genetics, perfect form, perfect being. The Emperor descended from his throne and greeted Hayes with genuine warmth. This surprised the human captain. Most alien leaders treated humans with polite distance, viewing them as an interesting but primitive species. The Emperor, however, spoke to Hayes as an equal. "Captain Hayes, welcome. Your journey was long, but I am pleased you accepted my invitation," the Emperor said, his voice deep and commanding. "Thank you for the honor, Your Majesty. I am curious about your proposal," Hayes replied carefully. The Emperor's expression changed. A shadow passed across his face, and for a moment he looked tired and disappointed. He gestured for Hayes to follow him deeper into the palace. As they walked through endless corridors, the Emperor explained his situation. He had a daughter, Princess Lyra. She was brilliant, kind, and strong of mind. She understood politics, science, and philosophy better than most, but she had been born with a rare genetic condition. The condition had partially paralyzed her lower body. She could move, could function, but she could not walk without assistance. By standards, this made her defective, unsuitable, a broken bloodline. The Emperor had issued a galaxy-wide call for marriage proposals. He was offering his daughter's hand to any species that would accept her. The reward was vast: territorial rights, technological exchange, political alliance with the most powerful empire in known space. Hundreds of delegations had arrived. The Emperor had hoped anyone, would see past the condition and value the person underneath. They arrived at a large observation window overlooking the palace gardens. Below, Hayes could see a young woman sitting in a high-backed chair near a fountain. She was beautiful in a way that seemed different from other. Her features were softer, less perfect. But there was something in the way she held herself, something in the way her eyes moved across the garden, that spoke of a mind full of depth and intelligence. "That is Lyra," the Emperor said quietly. Below, the first alien delegation was meeting with the princess. A tall crystalline being approached her. Hayes watched the exchange from above. The alien examined the princess carefully, then turned to speak with the Emperor's advisors. Even from this distance, Hayes could see the rejection in every movement. The ambassador moved away, back toward the palace. Then came the words that would haunt Hayes for the rest of his life. The ambassador spoke loud enough for everyone to hear, including Lyra. "How could one so broken produce suitable heirs? Your Majesty, surely you understand that this union would weaken your bloodline, not strengthen it." Hayes saw Lyra flinch. He saw the way her hands gripped the arms of her chair. For just a moment her brave face cracked, and genuine pain showed through. Then she fixed her expression, as if someone had told her to wear an invisible mask. Over the next 2 hours, Hayes watched as delegation after delegation met with the princess. The pattern was always the same. Initial politeness, a moment of realization that something was wrong, quick rejection, harsh words spoken without care for who might hear. Some ambassadors did not even bother to hide their disgust. They refused because they valued physical strength above all else. The Venusians claimed they could not merge genetically with someone so weak. The collective said their civilization had spent generations perfecting their genetics and would not undo that work. Even the merchants of the trading union, who claimed to value profit above all else, walked away. There was no profit in being associated with something broken, they said. With each rejection, Hayes saw Lyra retreat further into herself. Her shoulders curved forward. Her eyes stopped moving across the garden. By the end, she sat completely still, a statue made of flesh and hope and dying dreams. The Emperor stood beside Hayes in silence. "This is why I invited you, Captain Hayes. I needed to see if humans would be different. Your species has survived on the harshest worlds, against impossible odds. I thought perhaps humans might value something other than perfect genetics. I thought perhaps humans understood that strength comes in many forms." Hayes turned to look at the Emperor. "You are asking if I think any human would marry your daughter." "I am asking if humans are different," the Emperor said. "The galaxy has made its answer clear, but humans are still unknown to us. Perhaps humans have wisdom the rest of the galaxy has forgotten." Hayes looked back down at the princess. She sat alone in the garden now, abandoned by everyone. The late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the marble stone. She looked small, even though Hayes knew she was tall. She looked broken, even though Hayes could see the strength in how she held herself. Something inside Hayes shifted. A thought formed in his mind, dangerous and revolutionary, an idea that would change everything for both of them. "Your Majesty," Hayes said slowly, "I would like to meet your daughter." The Emperor turned to face him, surprise flashing across his perfect features. Around them, the court gasped. Advisors began speaking urgently among themselves. This was not what anyone had expected. Hayes did not wait for permission. He turned from the observation window and walked toward the gardens. Behind him, he heard the Emperor say something that sounded like hope. The captain had no idea what he would say to the princess. He had no plan. All he knew was that in the entire galaxy, someone needed to see her as she truly was. Someone needed to show her that being different did not mean being less. As he descended the stairs toward the garden, Hayes knew that his life was about to change completely, and the life of Princess Lyra would change as well. Neither of them understood yet how deep this change would go or how it would reshape the entire galaxy. The garden was quiet when Captain Hayes arrived. Princess Lyra sat in her chair near the fountain, staring at nothing. She did not seem to notice his approach at first. When she finally became aware of his presence, her body went rigid. Her eyes moved to his face with something like fear. "Another one," she said. Her voice was sharp and bitter. "Did my father send you to deliver more polite words before another polite rejection? I think I have heard enough politeness for one day." Hayes sat down on the stone bench nearest her chair. He did not ask permission. He simply sat and looked at her directly. "My name is David Hayes. I am the captain of the Horizon's Light. I come from Earth, a human world, and I am not here to reject you," he said. Lyra laughed. It was not a happy sound. "You have not even spoken with my advisors yet. You have not read my genetic profile. You have not heard the long list of reasons why my bloodline is damaged. How could you possibly know whether to reject me? You are just being kind. Everyone has been kind, and the kindness is worse than the rejection." Hayes did not argue with her. Instead, he asked a question. "Have you ever heard of a human named Helen?" Lyra turned to look at him fully now. Her expression showed confusion. "No, I know of many great thinkers, but this name is unfamiliar to me." Helen lived hundreds of years ago, long before humans left Earth. She was born blind and deaf. By standards, she would have been considered completely defective, but Helen learned to communicate. She learned to read and write. She became one of the most powerful voices for human rights in her entire era. She changed the minds of millions of people. She proved that physical limitation means nothing compared to the strength of the human mind. Lyra's bitter expression softened slightly. She did not speak, but she waited for him to continue. There was another human named Stephen Hawking. He developed a disease that slowly paralyzed his entire body. By the time he was middle-aged, he could not move anything except his eyes. He could not speak without a machine, but he became one of the greatest physicists who ever lived. He understood the universe in ways that few people can comprehend. His mind reached further than anyone else's could reach. Hayes leaned forward. Measure worth by what the body can do. Humans measure worth by who the person is inside. We understand that the mind and the spirit are far more powerful than any muscle. Lyra looked away. You are different from the others, but this is still kindness. You are trying to make me feel better about something that cannot be fixed. It cannot be fixed because nothing is broken, Hayes said. Your body is your body. It works the way your body works. This is true for all living things. They are made of crystal and light. They are made of hard shell and thick muscle. You are made of whatever genetics created. None of these forms are broken. They are simply different. For the first time, something genuine flickered in the princess's eyes. Not hope exactly, but the beginning of a crack in the wall she had built around her heart. Tell me more about these humans, Lyra said. Tell me about your people. Hayes spent the next hours telling her about Earth. He described the vast oceans and tall mountains. He told her about human history, about civilizations that rose and fell, about wars and peace, about art and music and literature. He spoke of human determination to survive against impossible odds. He explained how humans had adapted to every environment on their home world and then beyond it. We do not value perfection, Hayes explained. We value what you can do with what you have been given. We value creativity and courage and the ability to keep trying even when everything seems impossible. These things matter more than genetic perfection. He told her stories of human heroes who were not physically perfect, warriors who fought despite injury, leaders who led despite doubt, artists who created despite having no obvious talent, scientists who discovered truth despite having limited education, mothers who raised children despite having nothing, fathers who worked themselves to exhaustion despite being weak. Ordinary humans doing extraordinary things with ordinary bodies. Lyra listened intently. As the sun descended toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, she began to speak about herself. She told him about her childhood, about being taught that she was a disappointment. She described the moment she learned she could never be worthy of marriage because of her condition. She spoke of the shame she had felt, not for anything she had done, but simply for existing in a form that did not match standards. When I was young, I thought I could overcome it through achievement, Lyra said. I studied harder than anyone else. I learned everything I could about politics and science and philosophy. I thought if I could prove my mind was superior, people would overlook my body. But it did not work. No matter what I achieved, I was still the broken princess. Hayes listened without interruption. He understood now that this was what the princess needed most. Not more kind words, not false hope, but someone willing to actually listen to her pain without looking away. I believe you about Helen and Stephen Hawking, Lyra said finally. I believe that humans think differently about these things, but you are one person, Captain. One person willing to sit in a garden with me and tell kind stories. The entire galaxy has rejected me. Can you really blame them? I do not think you need the entire galaxy's approval, Hayes said. I think you need people who understand your true worth. I think Earth could understand. I think humans could understand. My people would see not a broken princess, but a person of intelligence and courage and depth. Lyra looked at him with something close to wonder. You are very strange, Captain Hayes, but I find that I do not mind your strangeness. Would you stay? Would you sit with me a while longer?" Hayes smiled and nodded. As darkness fell across the garden and lights began to glow in the palace around them, the captain and princess continued talking. They spoke about dreams and fears, about what the future might hold, about what it meant to truly see another person and accept them completely. When Hayes finally left the garden hours later, something had shifted. Princess Lyra's face carried a softness that had not been there before. Her eyes held something new, not quite hope, but the possibility of hope. And in his own heart, Captain Hayes knew that his life had changed. He had come to this palace seeking an alliance for his people. Instead, he had found something far more valuable. He had found a person worth fighting for. The news spread through the palace like fire through dry grass. Captain Hayes had requested a private audience with the Emperor. The court buzzed with speculation. Everyone assumed this meant the human delegation was preparing to leave, that Hayes was being polite before delivering the final rejection. The palace staff began preparing for the departure ceremony, the one they had prepared for so many other species. The Emperor himself seemed resigned to the rejection. He sat on his throne, looking older than he had the day before. The weight of his daughter's rejection was becoming heavier with each passing hour. Even the most powerful ruler in the galaxy could not force his people to accept a child they had been taught to see as defective. Hayes arrived at the throne room in the morning light. The halls were quiet. Few people wanted to witness another disappointing moment. The Emperor rose from his throne, his expression neutral and guarded. "Captain Hayes," the Emperor said formally, "I assume you have reached a decision regarding our proposal." "I have, Your Majesty," Hayes said. He walked to the center of the throne room. His voice was calm and clear. "I am here to formally request the hand of Princess Lyra in marriage." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. For what felt like an eternity, nothing happened. Then the court erupted. Advisors shouted in confusion and anger. Guards stepped forward in shock. The Emperor stared at Hayes as if the captain had just announced he was flying directly into the sun. "This is impossible," one advisor said loudly. "The human cannot understand what he is saying." "Perhaps his species are even more primitive than we believed," another advisor suggested. "Perhaps they do not understand genetics at all." The Emperor raised his hand and the room fell silent immediately. He stepped down from his throne and approached Hayes. Up close, the Emperor's face was a mix of emotions: hope, fear, suspicion, and a desperate need to understand. "Why?" the Emperor asked simply. "Why would a human captain from a barely advanced species want to marry a defective princess? What advantage do you gain from this?" Hayes did not look away. He met the Emperor's eyes directly. "Because Princess Lyra is not defective, and I do not gain an advantage. Humans do not think about marriage as an advantage to be gained. We think of it as a choice based on seeing another person for who they truly are and accepting them completely." Hayes raised his voice so the entire court could hear him. "The galaxy has judged your daughter by her body. The galaxy has decided that her condition makes her less worthy of love, less worthy of respect, less worthy of a future. But the galaxy is wrong. You are all wrong." Gasps and angry murmurs came from the assembled nobles. Some looked scandalized. Others looked simply confused. "I am from Earth, a world where humans come in many forms. We have different colors of skin, different languages, different abilities. For thousands of years, my people created suffering by deciding that some humans were better than others based on how they looked or what their bodies could do. We have learned through endless pain that this way of thinking is not just wrong. It is evil." The word hung in the air like a weapon. Evil, not a word used lightly to describe the proud civilization. "Your Majesty, you have spent your entire life being taught that genetic perfection equals worth. Your civilization has built itself on this belief. But it is a lie. Worth does not come from perfect genetics. Worth comes from the character inside a person. Worth comes from intelligence, from courage, from kindness, from the ability to think and feel and dream. Hayes gestured toward the advisors and nobles. Every single one of you rejected Princess Lyra without ever having a real conversation with her. You rejected her based on one genetic variation. You did not ask about her mind. You did not ask about her heart. You did not ask about her dreams. You simply looked at her body and decided she was not good enough. The Emperor stood perfectly still, listening. I am asking her to marry me not despite her condition, but as part of accepting all of who she is. On Earth, we have learned that the most beautiful things in life come from understanding that different does not mean less. Diversity does not mean weakness. It means strength. It means the ability to see the world from many different perspectives. It means the ability to create solutions that single-minded perfection could never imagine. Hayes paused and took a breath. The human species came to the stars as underdogs. Every advanced civilization saw us as primitive and weak, but we have survived because we adapt. We overcome. We find strength in unexpected places, and we understand that every single person, no matter what form they take, has infinite value inside them. The Emperor's eyes were glistening with tears. For the first time, Hayes saw doubt in the most powerful ruler in known space. Not doubt about Hayes, but doubt about everything the Emperor had been taught to believe about his own daughter. Now, Hayes said, I would like to speak directly to Princess Lyra. Is she here? The Emperor turned to his advisors. Bring my daughter to the throne room immediately. Within minutes, Lyra was escorted into the chamber. She moved carefully in her chair, which glided across the polished floor on anti-gravity generators. When she saw Hayes standing in the center of the room, surrounded by court members, her face showed confusion. Then Hayes did something that shocked everyone present. He walked directly to the princess and knelt down in front of her chair. This was not a gesture of superiority or pity. It was a gesture of equality. It was a gesture that said, I am lowering myself not because you are beneath me, but because I want to look directly into your eyes. Princess Lyra, Hayes said, his voice full of genuine emotion, I have not known you long, but in the time we have spent together, I have seen a person of extraordinary intelligence and courage. I have seen someone who has faced rejection from the entire galaxy and still carried herself with dignity. I have seen someone who deserves far better than the way you have been treated. Lyra was trembling slightly. Tears had formed in her eyes. I am not marrying you because you need me to save you. I am marrying you because I respect you, because I admire you, because you are the kind of person I want to spend my life with. On Earth, on human worlds, there are millions of people who would celebrate you exactly as you are. People who would see your worth immediately. People who would be honored to call you family, call you friend, call you leader. Hayes took a breath. I am asking you to marry me, Princess Lyra, not as a consolation prize or as an act of mercy. I am asking you to marry me as a human man asking a woman he has come to care deeply about to build a future together. Will you say yes? The entire court held its breath. The Emperor held his breath. Lyra sat in her chair, tears running down her face, and she smiled. It was a real smile, not the protective mask she had worn before. It was a smile that came from deep inside, from a place that had finally believed it was allowed to hope. Yes, Lyra said. Her voice was quiet but certain. Yes, I will marry you, Captain Hayes. The court erupted, but this time it was not in anger. It was in genuine celebration. The Emperor descended from his throne and embraced his daughter. When he pulled back, he was crying openly, something the nobles had never seen before. I am sorry, he said to Lyra. I am sorry for ever believing what the galaxy said about you. I should have seen your worth long ago. As the celebrations began around them, Hayes and Lyra looked at each other across a small distance. Neither of them fully understood what would come next, but both of them knew that something fundamental had changed. Not just for them, but for everyone who had witnessed it. The news of the marriage agreement spread across the galaxy with incredible speed. Faster than any ship could travel. faster than light itself, seemed to carry the message to every corner of known space. By the time Hayes and Lyra boarded the Horizon's Light to begin their journey to Earth, the reaction was already reshaping civilizations. In the Empire, traditionalists viewed the Union with alarm. Angry voices demanded that the Emperor reconsider. How could he allow his daughter to marry someone from a primitive species? How could he contaminate their bloodline with human genetics? The old guard saw this as a betrayal of everything civilization had built. But something unexpected happened. The younger generation began asking questions that the older generation did not want to answer. If genetic perfection was so important, why had it produced a civilization of people who could reject a child for something beyond her control? If their way was so superior, why had a human captain shown more wisdom than all the advanced species combined? Within weeks, universities and academies across worlds were debating the meaning of worth. Philosophy professors who had been teaching genetic supremacy for decades found themselves challenged by students who had seen something different on that day in the throne room. Some of these professors changed their minds. Others fought against the change with everything they had. The Emperor made an announcement that shocked the Empire. He was commissioning a complete review of all genetic selection policies. He was ending the practice of evaluating citizens based on physical perfection. The law would change. The culture would have to change with it. The crystalline delegation that had rejected Lyra faced similar upheaval when they returned home. The ambassador who had spoken so cruelly about the princess's disability found himself facing serious questions from younger members of his species. How many citizens were being judged unfairly based on arbitrary standards? How many talented minds had been discarded because their forms did not match expectations? The civilization experienced a different kind of awakening. They had always valued strength above all else, but they began to realize that strength came in many forms. They began to wonder what they had lost by refusing to see strength in anything except physical power. A few brave thinkers began writing about how intellectual strength and emotional strength were just as valid as physical dominance. The Venusian Collective started its own review of their genetic standards. They discovered that many of their greatest thinkers and artists were people they had once considered genetically weak. They had been discriminating against the very people who could create the most beautiful and meaningful things their civilization possessed. Meanwhile, on the Horizon's Light, Hayes was showing Lyra human art, human music, and human literature. The princess was fascinated by everything. She watched a human symphony orchestra and wept at the beauty of the sound. She read human poetry and discovered that humans understood pain and loss and hope in ways that matched her own experiences. The ship's doctor was a woman named Sarah Daniels. She had been born deaf in one ear, something that would have made her unfit for duty in most galactic civilizations. But humans did not think that way. Sarah had become one of the best doctors in the human fleet precisely because she had learned to listen in different ways, to notice things that others missed. Sarah took Lyra to meet other humans on the ship. There was an engineer who had lost 3 fingers in an accident years ago. He was still one of the best engineers alive, having learned to work differently than most. There was who suffered from a chronic pain condition that most days made movement difficult. She still worked, still contributed, still lived a full life despite her physical limitations. Lyra's eyes were opened wider with each conversation. "They do not pity themselves," she said to Hayes one night as they looked out at the stars. "They simply live." "That is the human way," Hayes said. "We do not have time to waste on shame. We have too much to do. The universe is too large and too mysterious and too full of possibility to spend energy hatting ourselves for things we cannot control." When the Horizon's Light finally entered Earth's orbital space, Lyra pressed her face against the observation window. The planet was blue and green and brown, a world of living systems and natural beauty. She had never seen anything like it. Hayes took her to visit several places on Earth. First, They went to a center for people with physical disabilities. Here, humans who could not walk, could not see, could not hear, could not move their bodies in traditional ways were living full and complete lives. They were working, creating art, raising families, changing their communities. A blind human musician named Joseph performed a concert for Lyra. His fingers moved across the piano keys with perfect precision, creating music that seemed to come from another dimension. When he finished, he turned toward where Lyra was sitting. "Someone told me there is a princess here who doubted her own worth because of her body," Joseph said. "I want to tell you something. My blindness has taught me to see in ways that most sighted people never learn. It has made me a better musician because I understand sound in a deeper way. It has taught me empathy. It has taught me strength. I would not undo it even if I could." Lyra could not speak. There were too many emotions moving through her at once. Hayes also took her to see monuments built by humans throughout history. They visited the great cathedrals that humans had built with their own hands, designed by human minds. They saw sculptures and paintings, and writing that humans had created despite struggle and pain and limitation. "These things were not created by perfect beings," Hayes explained. "They were created by humans fighting against everything that seemed impossible. They were created by people with limitations, with fears, with doubts, but they created them anyway." Lyra asked to visit a human school. There she saw children of all kinds. Some moved in wheelchairs. Some communicated through sign language or special devices. Some had skin conditions that made them look different. Some had minds that worked in unusual ways, but they were all treated as equal. They were all valued. They were all included. A young human girl named Emma, who had been born with a genetic condition similar to Lyra's, spent an afternoon with the princess. Emma showed Lyra how she competed in sports, how she was learning mathematics, how her friends treated her with complete equality, how she had been taught from birth that her condition did not define her or limit her future. "I am sorry for your pain," Emma said to Lyra, "but I am glad you met Captain Hayes. My mother says that sometimes it takes meeting one kind person to change everything." By the time Lyra had spent a month on Earth, something fundamental had shifted inside her. The shame was gone, not forgotten but gone. In its place was a new understanding of who she was. She was not a broken princess. She was a woman of intelligence and strength. She was a woman who had faced the entire galaxy's rejection and found one person willing to see her true worth. And that had changed everything. She received a message from her father. The Empire's new laws were being written. They would protect genetic diversity instead of demanding genetic perfection. They would celebrate difference instead of punishing it. The Emperor was making a formal apology to all citizens who had been judged and found wanting by the old standards. "You did this," the message said. "You and Captain Hayes, you showed us a truth we had forgotten. You showed us that humanity understands something about worth that we had lost." Lyra read the message and smiled. She was no longer the broken princess anyone had rejected. She was the woman who had shown a galaxy that worth cannot be measured by perfect genetics. She was proof that love and acceptance were far more powerful than any genetic standard. 5 years later, the Great Assembly Hall on the neutral space station of Harmony orbited above a planet that had been chosen as a meeting place for all the major galactic powers. The hall was massive, designed to accommodate thousands of delegates from hundreds of different species. Every single seat was filled. Not since the founding of the Galactic Council had so many civilizations gathered in one place. Captain David Hayes stood at the entrance with his wife, Princess Lyra. She moved with the grace of someone who had accepted her body completely. She did not use a chair anymore. She had learned to walk with specialized supports that her engineers had designed with her input. She could walk slowly, could cover long distances, could do everything she had been told she could never do. Not because her body had changed, but because she had learned that her body was capable of far more than anyone had believed. The couple made their way down the central aisle. Everywhere they walked, members of different species stood in acknowledgement. They who had once valued nothing but physical power bowed respectfully. They who had rejected Lyra so cruelly offered formal greetings without the coldness they had once shown. They who filled entire sections of the hall stood as their princess passed, not to honor her position, to honor her courage. Lyra approached the speaking platform while Hayes took his seat in the observation area. The princess looked out at the vast assembly. She had learned to speak in the common galactic language, but she had also asked that her words be translated into every known language so that every citizen in the galaxy could understand her message. 5 years ago, Lyra said, her voice clear and strong, I was a princess without a future. My own civilization had decided I was not worthy of love because of my body. I was told that I was broken. I was told that I would never contribute anything meaningful to my world. I was told that I should accept my role as a disappointment to my family and my empire. The hall was completely silent. Every being present was listening with total attention. I believed them. I had no reason not to believe them. Every advanced civilization in the galaxy agreed. When they came to meet with me, they did not see a person. They saw a defective genetic line. They saw a potential weakness in their bloodlines. They rejected me before they ever spoke with me. They decided I was not good enough based on one thing I could not control. Lyra paused. Her hands rested on the podium, steady and strong. Then I met a human, a species that the galaxy had considered barely advanced, a species that had survived and thrived not because we were genetically perfect, but because humans know something about worth that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Humans know that every person contains infinite potential inside them. Humans know that difference is not weakness. Humans know that value cannot be measured by genetic markers or physical ability. She looked directly at Hayes. For a moment, it was as if they were alone in the garden where they had first met. Captain David Hayes did not pity me. He did not rescue me. He saw me. He saw a person worth knowing, worth spending time with, worth building a future with. He showed me that my worth as a person had nothing to do with my body and everything to do with who I am inside. Lyra turned back to the assembled delegates. I have spent the last 5 years on Earth and among human worlds. I have met humans who cannot see, but have created the most beautiful music I have ever heard. I have met humans who cannot walk but have won competitions that require incredible physical achievement. I have met humans who have minds that work differently than most, but who have discovered truths that changed their civilizations. I have met humans who are disabled, who are different, who do not match any genetic standard of perfection, and yet they live full, rich, meaningful lives. The delegates listened intently. Among them was the emperor who sat at the front. Tears were running down his face. I stand before you today to tell you that the empire has changed. We have abolished all genetic selection policies. We have passed laws that protect diversity and celebrate difference. We have begun to educate our children with a new understanding that worth comes from inside, not from perfect genetics. Lyra gestured to the other civilizations represented. But the Empire is not alone in needing this change. The galaxy as a whole has fallen into the trap of believing that some lives are more worthy than others based on how their bodies appear or function. We have rejected people. We have driven them to shame. We have wasted the potential of billions of beings simply because they did not match an arbitrary standard of perfection. Her voice became harder, more direct. This must change. Every civilization here must commit to ending genetic discrimination. Every society must protect the rights of all citizens regardless of physical ability, genetic variation, or difference from what is considered normal. If we do not make this change, we will continue to waste the greatest resource we have, the infinite potential of every single person born into our civilizations. Lyra raised her hands. I am not asking. I am demanding that the Galactic Council pass binding resolutions against genetic discrimination. I am demanding that your societies change their laws, change their education systems, change your cultures. I am demanding this not as a princess, but as a woman who has been rejected by the galaxy and found worth in places the galaxy overlooked." There was a long moment of silence. Then slowly the delegates began to stand. They were followed by the Venusians. Then species after species stood in honor of what Lyra had said. Within moments the entire assembly was standing, not out of obligation, out of genuine acceptance of her words. The vote, when it came hours later, was nearly unanimous. The few delegates who abstained came from species that would face major cultural changes, but they did not vote against the resolution. They simply abstained, acknowledging that they needed more time to understand the change that was coming. That night at the celebration that followed, Hayes and Lyra danced together. The music was human music, a style that had been shared throughout the galaxy by cultural exchange programs. Many other species had learned to appreciate it, had learned to feel the emotion in the rhythms and melodies. 3 months later, Lyra gave birth to their daughter. The child had features from both her parents. She had the sharp angles and tall frame of but also the warm skin tones and expressive eyes of a human. She had been born with a genetic variation that, 50 years before, would have been seen as a defect requiring immediate intervention or exile. Lyra held her daughter and looked down at her with complete love. The baby was not perfect by standards, but she was perfect in every way that actually mattered. She was alive. She was loved. She was a symbol of a new future where such combinations were possible, where diversity was celebrated, where every life was seen as valuable simply by existing. The Emperor came to see his granddaughter. He looked at the child and then at Lyra. "What will you name her?" he asked. "Hope," Lyra said simply. "We will call her Hope, because that is what she represents. The hope that the galaxy can change. The hope that we can learn to see the worth in everyone. The hope that love and acceptance are stronger than any genetic standard." The Emperor took his granddaughter's small hand in his own. He felt the tiny fingers grip his large ones with surprising strength. "What will she become?" he wondered aloud. "Anything she wants to become," Hayes said. "Because unlike you, unlike your civilization, unlike the entire galaxy, Hope will grow up knowing that her worth was never in question. She will grow up knowing that her body, whatever it is, whatever it can or cannot do, has value simply because it is hers. She will grow up knowing that she is enough, and that will make her capable of anything." Years passed. Hope grew into a brilliant mind and a strong heart. She became a teacher, traveling between human and worlds, helping to rebuild the educational systems that had been based on genetic discrimination. She became a bridge between species, showing that human and together could create something neither species could create alone. The story of Captain David Hayes and Princess Lyra became more than a historical event. It became the foundation of a cultural revolution that spread through the entire galaxy. The moment when one human man looked at a rejected princess and saw not her disability, but her worth. The moment when someone from a species barely admitted to the galactic community showed more wisdom than the oldest civilizations had. In the end, what changed was not the princess. She had always been worthy. What changed was the galaxy's ability to see her. What changed was the understanding that worth cannot be measured by genetic markers, that strength comes in infinite forms, and that love and acceptance are far more powerful than any scientific standard. The broken princess turned out not to be broken at all. She had simply been waiting for someone to see her as she truly was. And when that person arrived, when that human came to her garden and listened to her heart, everything changed. Not just for Lyra, not just but for the entire galaxy. A new dawn had begun, and it had started with one human who understood that every person, no matter how different, no matter how disabled, no matter how rejected by society, carries universes of potential within them. All they need is someone willing to see it.